What does it mean for me to heal from these difficult things I've been through? And what we're talking about is finding and cultivating well-being. And art is powerful at doing that because at a high level, it links a couple things that we separate.
Hi, everyone. Today on Queen Me, I am joined by someone who sits at the powerful intersection of mental health, arts-based healing, youth advocacy, and civic leadership. And I'm very, very excited for this conversation because we have a lot to discuss. Matt Sandoval is the CEO of Free Arts, a nationally recognized leader in trauma-informed creative arts programs for vulnerable youth, including children in foster care, shelters, domestic violence programs, and transitional living. Matt is a sought-after speaker, facilitator, and researcher whose work has been featured at major national conferences across child welfare, mental health, and youth development. From trauma recovery to community connection, from the science of post-traumatic growth to the power of creative expression, today's conversation explores why art is not a luxury, but a lifeline. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited for this conversation.
I am too, and thank you for the platform to talk about some of our favorite things, which is how people change, how art heals, and how we do that in a particular way at Free Arts.
Absolutely. I can't wait to dive into free arts and all the work that you do. I just want to start the beginning here. So one of the biggest myths, and I experienced this in school and I hear people talk about it a lot, is that art is extra. It's something added, right? But based on your experience, your research, your clinical perspective, what does the science actually show us about art as a tool for trauma healing?
Well, I think even beside the science of it, we have history to tell us part of the story. Every human society has had some storytelling mechanism that we can unearth and find with drawing, with paint, telling stories. We do our best to infer what was the message, what these might mean, but we don't actually know. And we also know that in these societies of the past, they had their own rituals and customs, things that they made with their own hands that really set them apart as a community, described who they were. It was part of their family structure and their community. And so I think there is something essential about our species, about humanity and the way we congregate, where we use this weaving in of storytelling and creation to explain important parts of ourselves. And you're right, it does definitely get kind of the back seat. It's looked as an addition or an extra. It's certainly often the first thing to be cut when the budget gets tight. But science and data is telling us really important things about the function of creative expression, artistic expression. And the fun thing about being in the role that I'm in, when I talk about expressive arts, some part of our audience immediately lights up. All right, we're going to make something. I can't wait. Let me tell you what I make, and they'll tell you all about their passions. And then when we talk about other parts of free arts, which is very much dedicated to serving vulnerable children, teens, and families, another group gets excited. Well, we don't separate them. We don't see the mentoring as distinct from creative expression. And there are some huge elements of expressive arts that are important to our well-being, but also in our process of returning to well-being. That's what we mean when we talk about healing in the free art space. There are definitely medical versions of this. There are definitely spiritual aspects of this. But it can also feel like a title or a word that's hard to achieve. What does it mean for me to heal from these difficult things I've been through? And what we're talking about is finding and cultivating well-being. And art is powerful at doing that because at a high level, it links a couple things that we separate. So we tend to separate a view of ourselves and a view of others and the way we communicate and express these things. And then at a biological base, when someone attends a workshop or a talk that we do, there's always a creative and expressive arts component. And every time, despite what the activity is about, you can feel the room shift, that things are different people feel lighter. They feel more engaged in what they're making because at a biological level, art is tapping in to multiple ways that we're built to be humans. The way we think, our nervous system, the fact that we can make something in a space together, where even if the project is designed to be my own individual project, being at the table as other people make theirs in this parallel work, it starts to do an important thing that we look for all the time, which is mirroring. Do I matter? If I enter this space and somebody does the thing that I do, we do this subconsciously. If you talk to somebody you know and you're on the same vibe, you'll start standing the way that they are. If they, touch their chin, that you might do the same. You might open in the same direction toward the room. We unconsciously mirror for comfort. We are trying to regulate. And I think there's been some powerful evidence that there really isn't a form of self-regulation. All regulation on emotion may really be forms of co-regulation. And the arts are ways for us to do that, even if in that moment we happen to be by ourselves, because we might be drawing or painting or dancing or composing music. But the art, the expression of it, the development of it is communicating self. And as it is experienced, will be something that is shared with other people. So there's a biological component, there's a social, and there's a cultural component that are all part of expressive arts, which um, is a difficult thing to um, see put as a secondary, as an add-on. And so you're right that these are things that some parts of our community don't quite understand, but the artists do. And even when you're a non-artist, I didn't get my job and my title running this organization because I do the best art or because I'm a professional artist. I'm willing to take that brave step to be creative with what's in front of me. And I have my kind of modes and preferences for that. But we have a powerful mantra here that there are no mistakes in art and that we don't set rules that um, you have to do it a certain way by a certain time and for a grade. And that really changes the dynamic we have with people who've been through a lot of things.
I love that. And I'm so glad you mentioned too, you know, when you said that arts is one of the first things that's cut. I remember very distinctly, when I was deciding where to go to high school, I was visiting a couple of schools, but it was between two. And the one my family had asked, "Okay, can you tell us more about the art program?" Because that's something that I was just interested in. I wanted to get more engaged in it. And they took us to a very, very small room in the basement, and that was where the art was. The second school that I visited, I said, "Can you tell me more about the art program?" And I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but they were like, "Oh, of course." And they take me to a huge building, and it had clay, it had all of these beautiful things, and they said, "This art's part of every day here. You come here to express yourself, you come here to take classes. This is really a big part of the school." And anytime you would walk through the school, you would see art from students, from teachers, whomever. So that environment even shifted my way of thinking because it felt calming and it felt like I could be creative. So it would be wonderful if all students, everyone could experience that. So I'm really so glad you mentioned that. And that really gets into this thought of too, you mentioned that anyone can participate regardless of artistic skill. So, what changes in your perspective when the pressure to perform or create something perfect is removed completely?
Yeah, it's been said, uh, this is from the clinical space of expressive arts, that coming to a moment of creativity is an invitation to self-compassion. And back to those groups of people I was talking about, if I were to come in and say, I'm going to do a workshop. This actually happened to me last year. I walked in, here comes the supplies. And it wasn't said with excitement, but they still signed up for that workshop. And I was like, oh, the art supplies might scare you. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, me too. And I'm not lying because I'm about to lead the workshop and I'm not really sure how this is going to go, right? So being able to be in that space where we begin with a blank slate with the things that we want to do, it's going to prompt people for some of the automatic negative thinking that they have. I'm not good enough. Nobody's going to like this. I'm going to do something that's embarrassing and people are going to laugh. And that's the artists, that's the professionals, right? So people like me that don't take technique classes in painting, and I'm sitting there doing the best I can, and I look over, and one of my colleagues, and we do art fairly often, a couple times a month, planned as staff functions and meetings. So this will happen that you might look over and see somebody's really doing something that is much different than yours. Let's put it that way, in a nice way, and notice how feelings of judgment, of comparison are showing up. And in my sense, I might be thinking, I don't measure up. I'm not good enough. Why am I even here? Why should anybody listen to me? And then there are other colleagues that we have here that do take the technique classes. They are talented enough to have shows and show their art. And it's time for them to do art in a, you know, collegial space. And they're just as nervous because I'm the professional artist. I've had all this training. What if my art isn't very good? And here are these two poles of human experience, the trained and the untrained, the amateur and the alleged professional. And they're both just being given a creative prompt, and the sense of automatic judgment is showing up. And what art can help us do is learn to tolerate that distress a little bit longer. And it's telling us how often that negative pattern of automatic thinking is showing up anyway. So if you have this tendency around your art, I bet you it's showing up at work. I bet you it's showing up in your relationships. It's showing up around anything that you take seriously or anything that might be viewed by others. And so it is an avenue, it is a gateway to practice self-compassion. Can I make art that I know I might have some feelings about and be okay with having those feelings of maybe not measuring up, not being perfect? Back to the mantra, there are no mistakes in art. It's a lot easier when your art, is the quality where somebody's going to sign the corner. And yet we can still come at it with knowing that the only person who's going to enjoy this might be me, and that's enough, right? So this is a opportunity to engage with the things and the feelings and the self-talk that otherwise is very difficult to bring up and notice. It's automatic, and we're kind of wired this way, but it is also quietly making us miserable. And so learning to see it as separate from us and doing art and allowing that voice to be there, but not believing that we have to control it or that we have to listen to it can make a huge difference for people.
Mm, absolutely. Absolutely. To enjoy it. The enjoyment is so key. I love that. Love that. I want to talk a bit about trauma, because we know that free arts talks about post-traumatic growth and not just recovery. So I'm curious, one, if you could share with us a bit more about what does post-traumatic growth mean, but also if you could share with us maybe some things that people misunderstand about trauma or these terms or these concepts, because I think there's a lot of things that people maybe aren't getting right in this space.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to realize we've been on quite a journey in the field and in the world around this. And you've arrived at a certain level where the criticism is maybe this is overused and talked about too much. And right now I'm thinking about like the critique that some people have about like mental health TikTok and the things that people might say or do, on a social media feed, regardless of their actual qualifications, right? And there are definitely people who are qualified. I'm not saying everyone who has a voice in that media space isn't something that should be shared or doesn't have some weight to it. But also for other people, they've come to a place to say the misunderstanding means, well, because somebody's experienced trauma, that they can make any excuse they want and never have to, show up, be responsible, take responsibility. So these are, examples of reasoning from extremes. But I think the journey that we've been on has been informed by observation and then obviously with testing around what works. And unfortunately, it's the experiences of veterans coming back, particularly from Vietnam, but all of the conflicts since then that have helped the field study the impacts of these terrible things that people see, people do, or happens to them that place us in this environment, this example of time and space where we're absolutely terrified and things are out of control. And you don't have to be a veteran to have had that happen to you. And what we think about now in terms of trauma at a clinical space is often described in terms of managing symptoms, right? So we're not going to go over, all the elements of post-traumatic stress disorder, but there are several items that help us inform, is this experience becoming so present it dysregulates the moment that you're in now. And that's the hallmark, which is I can't operate with what's in front of me because what I've seen, what I've done, what I've heard, what has happened to me keeps showing up. And so these became pronounced experiences and understandings primarily through the treatment of veterans. But over time, we've learned it's not just these hardships, but also the breaks in relationships that occur. And so we've understood things like moral injury, that even being in a place where you've been betrayed and had to do a difficult thing that's against your values is itself often compounding the negative events of being scared for your life, being in a very serious situation. At Free Arts, what we do is train adult mentors, and we do this from a field of people just like the average citizen. They're not clinicians necessarily, to do group mentoring, group activities around the arts with a very specific population. So, children in foster care. So, they're experiencing a traumatic episode of being separated from your parents. And that is, regardless of the background, very, very difficult to experience. Doubtless, your audience has probably people who've had this experience themselves. So, foster care, those who live in a shelter environment, either by experiencing homelessness or having domestic violence experiences in their home. Again, now they're separate from a safe home. So, safe parent, safe home, or maybe a combination of both. We also will go into treatment centers with teenagers and do our programs there. So, these are residential type treatment centers. So, our lane of what those traumas might be is narrow in age group, but is broad in the kinds of things that happen with some similarities. There's experiences of lack of safety, perhaps some experiences where their caregivers should have taken care of them and are not. And like all children do, we are born and wired to connect to our family. And that can be complicated for somebody who's actually not been cared for in the ways that are actually supportive and respect their dignity. And so that's our audience. So when we think about the trauma here and the essential mission of using the arts to transform children's trauma, what we're recognizing is that everyone that is involved in our program at first has experienced something that has been heartbreaking. And then we introduce relationship with a trained adult mentor in a group environment with the arts. And we do this so that that experience, that those experiences of heartbreak, they change, they morph, they don't necessarily disappear. And this is the unfortunate truth about post-traumatic growth is we can't promise that you can forget, but we can also arrive at a new place of living that we may have been introduced to this work because of heartbreak, but it doesn't get to have the last word. And that's what we're about is creating more context, more connection, more space, more activity in and around the arts, such that this person adds and also to the ends of all their sentences that yes, these things happen, but that doesn't function as a permanent label, right? So we talk about people being first. And because you're in the foster care system, doesn't mean that we're going to label you forever a foster kid. This is something that the state has done to protect you. It is also not the ideal arrangement for your home. Nobody volunteers for this. It is better than the alternatives, but it is still not ideal. And so our offering here is to train people to understand the implications of those experiences and create safety. And so if there's one thing that we're contributing to the field, and we're going to have some published peer-reviewed journals, articles coming out later this year. We do a lot of local teaching and training and workshops. We do a couple national ones every year. Is what we are explaining that through our methodology, our training, we're building a community of average citizens that knows how to understand the impacts of trauma and engage in a way where we put strengths first, where we put children first, where we let creativity have choice and voice, where we allow children to engage at a level of their own comfort. We talk and speak to them in the ways that they prefer, and that we are, as much as possible, really not in a punitive stance with them. We guard the space. You can't threaten people, you can't hurt people within our programs. But if you need more time, or if we're doing poetry and you'd rather paint, we'll make time for painting. We are giving you the space, the opportunity to express yourself, the time to find a new connection. Because we realize that what's essentially true is this person has already had the challenge of not being able to trust certain people that they ought to be able to trust. And it's going to take special care and time for them to be able to work and trust with us. So we know that's true about the children, teens, and families we serve, but we train our mentors in a way to be ready for that and to do important things. Like we don't necessarily need to engage with anyone on their story unless they want to. And even then, with the reminder that we are here to be a witness, but not to fix. We are here not to try to find the silver lining in very difficult things. And we're here to actually validate what's true and good about them, that they have shown up today, they're doing the best they can, that they're enjoying the artwork, that they can come back next week, they can be in the camp program day after day, and that they do matter, and that they are somebody who deserves respect and dignity. And that when they make art and it's the right environment for it to be shown, we'll clap real hard for them and just be proud of the effort, not necessarily the product. There's no competition around that. And those are key parts to what we do to help people. And it's an important part of addressing those traumatic experiences, those spaces where people have, gone through profound lack of safety. And we do what we can here to build it so that it's dependable, that they're physically safe, that they'll emotionally be respected, they'll go as far as they can today. And that rather than praise the product, which was what getting a grade is like in school, we'll praise the effort, we'll praise the presence, we'll praise the showing up. And even when it's hard, because these are transferable skills, right? Showing up when it's hard, going through the things when they're difficult, being consistent. These are things that lead to careers and to jobs and to great relationships. And so that's how we believe that what happens in our programming is something that builds skills that last past their participation with us.
Mm. I love it. I think there's so many things that amaze me about the work that you do, but I think it really goes into what you just talked about this awareness and how you do you train people, you train thousands through this informed mentorship. And that's really what's moving the needle. That's what's shaping people, and that's creating such a big impact. Um, I want to switch gears a little bit here. And one of the things too that we've talked about when we first connected, and that I really enjoy hearing your perspective on, is the concept of flexing your civic muscle and getting involved in the community, right? We are at this moment in time where people want to get involved. They're not sure how. And we see this especially in Pittsburgh, but really anywhere. The first thing that goes into people's minds is, I'm going to start a new organization. And that's fine, right? That their mind goes there, right? But you have a different philosophy that I want people to hear, especially our nonprofit audience here. You said that means often supporting existing organizations. Tell us more about that. What do you wish more people understood about this concept?
Yeah, I think that people, and I'm sharing this from an experience where we operate in the general Phoenix area and somewhat into Tucson. We're expanding in other parts of the state, which means people will be a volunteer here, then they'll move and they'll call us up and say, "Hey, I've come to this new area and they don't have anything like you. So I'm wondering what it would be involved to kind of start this here. And we'll kind of go through what that looks like. And so I get this question a lot about how would I go about doing that? And so I have to lay it out for them. And I will in the same way here, which is, well, it depends on really what you want your work to be. Because if you want to be the doer of like, I want to be making art with kids every Tuesday afternoon for the rest of my life, I'm retired, I have the time to do it, then starting a nonprofit is probably not what you're looking for because there's a whole other component here of like setting up the structures, raising the money, finding the donors, reporting back to the donors, having operations, developing procedures, providing training, um, staffing, art supplies, thinking through your model, how you train people, how you explain what you do, the PR and marketing elements of explaining why your work matters. Now, those are exciting to some people, and they're like, yes. So those are your people that are thinking, oh, this should be a venue or a career. So when it comes down to how do I have this passion, maybe I have this personal experience, how do I channel it? I ask people, what's your ideal way of spending time? So if it's fancy versions of paperwork with a lot of stress, low credit, and probably lower than average pay, then go ahead and start your
Hmm.
nonprofit.
Great.
But if you want to spend the time doing the activity close to people, consider how you spend that time as the mentor, as the person who does it. Because I can tell you, I've got almost 20 years in the nonprofit space, that there is a value added, right? You do get something from the work. There is something special about it. And you can, you have to come to some point of understanding what that is for you because it isn't a perfect answer to all the scenarios, right? I am comfortable with who I am and what I do because I am willing to say that my work will create a good in a space where it might not otherwise exist. And so that is enough for me, right? I know that without my efforts, there might be some segment of the population who doesn't have these experiences. That's motivational. It also needs to be boundaried. I can't save everyone. I have to go home. I have to have my own life. I have to manage my own retirement. Like I have to have those things too. So when it comes down to people saying, should I start my own nonprofit? As I tell them, my honest advice is probably don't do it. Particularly here in Maricopa County, there's something like 25,000 nonprofits, and that includes Maricopa County, for context, is where Phoenix is, and it's a large county, seventh largest in the country. So it's geographically large and dense in population. And these 20,000 nonprofits all represent um, everything from the my garage-based animal rescue that has 5 cats, and I get donations from my neighbors. So I got a 501(c)(3). Great. All the way up to your giant nonprofits with million-dollar, multi-million-dollar budgets. And the bigger you get, your pressures about how to scale, how to have consistency, how to report back, not just that outputs, how many people you serve, but what did they experience here and thinking through that. And so if you're into that kind of thinking structurally, then there is a role in a profession, in a social benefit or a nonprofit space for you. If you want to be up close and experiencing the work, then it really is probably a better equation to find the larger projects and fold into one and to be part of that and to realize where you really get the most joy. Is it really out of getting the grant and getting the check? And the answer for some small people is, yeah, I like writing and I love the experience and I love sending in the report. Now, if you're like, gee, I don't want to do that. I just want to color with kids. We'll take you. We've got spaces for both. But for most people, the answer really is time with the audience that we're working with, creating things, and I'm going to have my cup overfilled with joy. So that's how I approach that question with people to say it's a noble profession. If you want to dedicate high amounts of time, you're really focused on, am I creating something that doesn't otherwise exist? And if the answer is it does exist, and it's already a giant pool, it's got a certain amount of resilience to it. And well-known, larger nonprofits, like any org, they're resilient. Like they can go through difficult things. Anything with years, Free Arts, for instance, I've been here 3+ years, but it's got 33 years of existence. It has had many people kick its tires. And so it's got resilience to it. And I can fold into that rather than thinking I'm offering something brand new on my own, even if I'm passionate about it. And to be honest, there are a lot of people who start it because they want their name on it or they want it. It comes from a personal element here of their own experience, which is very inspirational, gets things off the ground. But no one here lives forever, as far as I know. And we all have to think about continuity of operations and programs. And so, what does it become when you're not there to run it? And people that are very passionate and kind of brand themselves in the nonprofit space as a solo project or as a new project, they're not always thinking through those implications.
And I'm so glad we brought this up because it is what I think we need to be talking about more, and nonprofits need to be talking about more. To add to your point here too, it's so important that people do that research initially, right? Because oftentimes people are like, okay, I want to start an organization around X, Y, and Z. And there often are organizations doing that. Now, if the problem that you're trying to solve, if that mission, you don't see it out there, okay, maybe let's think about what you could do, but you're exactly right. You want to find joy. And if you're going through this whole process to start a new nonprofit, there's not as many funds to go around. It's going to be hard to fund X, Y, Z, all of these organizations. So if you really care about that mission, think about the organizations that are around that are doing it. Um, and I say that all the time too with people that want to are interested in either being on a board or serving as a volunteer. If you're interested in the strategic and financial oversight, I think a board's a great thing for you. If you're interested in actually going to the programs, sitting in, working with kids, etc., then that's more of a volunteer. But we don't take the time to have some of those discussions.
Yeah, they're important. We have to honestly tell people if you'd rather spend the time making art, being with children, yeah, the budget planning committee is not going to make you happy.
Right.
Um, it's helpful to add that context so that I can do a little bit of both. Um, but it really is possible it does take all of those perspectives to make it work because for something to have that resilience and continuity, people have had to care for its finances, care for its
Mhm.
public mission, care for its image, care for its relationships with its donors, its founders. Those things are important too.
Absolutely. And another nonprofit related question for you, because we get this question a lot from our listeners. You know, when you talk with funders, policymakers, nonprofits, you know, you're giving out a lot of data all of the time, right? Because that's supporting, the financial aspect, going back to the work that you do. But are there certain data points or outcomes that really have these partners or these future partners stop and be like, okay, wow, this is making a big difference, right? Like, what does that data look like to showcase that?
Yeah, one of the things here that is very strong about free arts is for on year 4 or 5, we've been going through pretty rigorous program evaluations to both test what we call in the field the logic model. Like, how do all the pieces of your effort, so anybody who's never seen one, most nonprofits have this, a lot of grants require it, but it's a conceptual map of how all the things like X amount of volunteer hours by mentors doing these programs produce what. So it's almost like an assembly line kind of concept or metaphor for what's being produced by your activity. So right away, it's telling you what is it you hope is the change that's happening in your audience? How do your resources make that happen? And then evaluation tests whether that's true and it tests whether it's meaningful and perhaps starts to have a dialogue about what in particular is causing that. So when you think about our work here, historically we've been known as Free Arts. We are shifting here this year. We're changing our name to Art Heals Arizona. So I have to practice saying Art Heals Arizona.
Yay,
Um,
congratulations.
yeah, thank you. So when we think about what we're here to accomplish, there's 5 things, and we usually lay it out like a pyramid, so it looks like kind of a foundational thing. Although they're not really linear, but we hope on the bottom we produce safety, and then above that, self-expression. So that's where art and creativity, and above that is skill building, right? So skill building here is that ability to relate to others, work with peers, work with adults, trust a new adult, develop and use my own regulation skills. And then above that is self-efficacy, which is doing difficult things that are important to me, like doing well on a test, going to a job interview, talking to your crush at lunchtime, whatever it might be, and age appropriate. And then on the kind of the top is this idea that that pattern, that flow of these things, and they're probably more circular than they are linear, is resilience. With these things in hand as experienced skills and attributes, we can show up the best possible way for ourselves. So what we've learned over time by doing a lot of pre and post tests with, believe me, very excited teenagers and older grade school children. Here's a multi-page survey. We'd love for you to take it. Of course, we do all the research consent that's required. But now we're a few years into it. So we've got data sets that are telling us that there are very high experiences of safety. We intend to produce safety, but we don't tell them that's the goal. We just say, here's the time and space user activity. And then they take the survey before and after, and they're able to tell us, yeah, I experienced these things uniquely here. And so safety meaning like my physical safety, my sense of emotional, my sense of mutual respect. I was treated by the adults. I saw them treat each other in a certain way that is safe and that I enjoyed my ability to express myself. I found value in that. And then the skills around when I became upset or when I felt there was a challenge, I could talk to somebody. I can find a new way of doing this. I can solve a new problem in a different way. And these are all expressed. These all come from psychometric domains from other tools put into our own survey that the children themselves are taking. They've never seen the pyramid. They don't know the flow, but they answer the questions and it tells us we have very high levels of safety and we have this contributing into these gradual elements here that and now we're doing a little bit more data dive to go, does safety open the skill building or does skill building make people more safe or are they happening in parallel? Because this helps people who are doing things out in other areas decide how to put their programs together. And so being trauma informed and training our mentors in a certain way means we're committing to building the same kind of interpersonal environment. And what's fabulous about what we do is, yes, we have this wonderful facility, Parsons Place for Art Transformation in downtown Phoenix, but 95% plus of our programming happens in the foster care group home, in the shelter, in the treatment center. So our experience of safety is portable to those environments because we're training people to reproduce it. And they're not clinicians, they're not perfect either. They are people who are willing to grow and learn our approach and do things that are important to build that environment. What's been awesome throughout our experience is that we've had a great public reputation and it continues. So these same evaluations taken from the partner agency staff, these are the groups that we work with, they come back with either 100% or very high in the 90s satisfaction rates. Like the staff who watch the program get something out of it. The staff can't wait for the program to happen. So they're seeing that this is novel, it's important, that the children and teens are different before and after the program. And so this is what's informing us. And so a few years into it, we are testing more and more, not just what the children experience in our various programs, but we're also understanding a bit more what makes the mentors click and what makes us effective with our partners. So when you start to boil that all together, you get this wonderful recipe that talks about a community where if you're involved in the Art Heals Arizona, formerly known as Free Art Space, you're going to be changed too, even if you're just coming to be part of the volunteer effort. You're not the audience because it is a novel community. It is going back to these biological, expression and community building. And honestly, just empathic care for each other matters and it's important.
I have to say this is so helpful, I think, for so many organizations, partners, community leaders to hear from how you describe this work and everything that you're doing is so powerful. It's so data driven and backed. And it's just definitely one of my favorite conversations thus far. Um, I do want to talk about your 2026 symposium because that is very exciting. Tell us about that because it's in August, correct?
Yeah, August 13th, 2026 in Scottsdale. So it's just outside of Phoenix. It's a 1 day, I believe it's on a Thursday. And we are offering a 1 day symposium with an expressive arts keynote by Kathy Macchioldi, who literally wrote the textbook on trauma-informed expressive arts and has toured and visited free arts in the past, as well as 11 other workshop topics delivered by, in some cases, a mentor, a staff member, or artists out in our space about elements of our work. So everything from um, how to build partnerships, how to engage with certain types of modes of art. I'm actually doing a workshop myself that is actually about giving perspective and skills to helpers who honestly burn themselves out. And it's actually a real issue and a complicating problem. But we're going to do that by talking about these concepts while making a collage of self-care. So, collage of comfort will be my workshop. So, why should somebody come to this? Because you're going to be imbued, you're going to be surrounded by creativity, art. You're going to have a chance to make and experience art. You're going to be given a full day's program in a wonderful facility in Scottsdale. And we will also have 11 different workshops in 2 different sessions for you to pick from. So there is all those elements I was talking about, right? We're going to have self-expression. We're going to build safety. We're also going to give people choice. We're also going to find a way for you to express your creativity and voice. And so, in a way, coming to symposium is like the adults experiencing what Art Heals Arizona, formerly known as Free Arts, is all about.
I love it. I love it. And we'll, of course, include all of the links for people to engage with in the description. Please check this out. I mean, if you're inspired by this, if you want to hear more, this symposium is just a really wonderful opportunity to do just that. Um, wonderful, wonderful. My favorite and my last question for you, and I'm excited to hear your response because you've had just a career of incredible experiences. We do end every episode with this question. For you, Matt, what does it mean to unleash your inner queen, and how do you tap into that power in your leadership, your healing work, and your everyday life?
Yeah, I love the question because at first, when I checked out being on here, I was like, I want to respect the space. If this is intended just for females in leadership, like maybe not for me, but you were open to it. I'm like, because that's a totally fine title to give me, right? So it's also realizing that to be the queen is to be special, to be someone, when I think about it, how it's used kind of in slang. It can also be not just the authority and somebody who's been invested with power, but also it's somebody who knows who they are and knows what they're about. And I think when you're around somebody who's very comfortable in their own skin, it's like this warming feeling of a campfire when it's really cold out. You got to sit close. You're not really sure why it feels the way it does, but it's important. So when I think about being the queen me, I think it is also knowing that you have something to offer, that your life has meaning to it, that you've been able to build meaning, and that when we engage with others, we can witness their own growth and in some ways enhance our own. And then we experience something special when somebody takes a little bit of inspiration from us. And so I think being in that kind of community where people are giving themselves that role that is both royal sounding, powerful sounding, but also self-confident and also is self-aware. I think that's an important title, and that's what goes in it when I hear it.
I love it. Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad we had you on, and I feel like I could listen to you talk all day about this work. That's how passionate and incredible what you're doing is, because you are truly helping children and teens move from trauma to growth and to express themselves and to really connect. So thank you so, so much. I also want to say that for those that are interested in hearing more from Matt, he has his own podcast, Canvas of the Heart, that they can
Yep.
find through Free Arts, correct? Do you want to just share a little bit about that
Yeah,
and
you
how
can
people can
find
access?
Sure, you can find Canvas of the Heart anywhere you get your typical podcasts, Apple and Spotify, also directly from our website. So you can find it at arthealsaz.org, which will point to it, or freeartsaz.org. Like I said, we're doing that name change, but both of those will point you home. And so you can find what you need there. Please come visit. Let us know if we can collaborate in some way. If you're in the Arizona area, we'd love to partner. If you're outside it, if we've inspired you, we'd be happy to help you be on your way to creating something similar in your space. But please take advantage of our learning opportunities. We'd be excited to meet you. And thank you again, Ashley, for the chance to be here on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we can't wait for people to continue to engage in your work. And for those that are listening, please don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Every time you do, you help another person step into their strength and unleash their inner queen. Thank you so much, Matt.